Hi, and congratulations on completing week 2, Revelation and Scripture. Hi, I think I just double recorded this, but congratulations on completing week 2, Revelation and Scripture. The goals this week were to explain the modes of general and special revelation, along with the proper uses and limits for each kind of revelation. So a couple of your assignments really honed into the distinctions between general and special revelation and trying to answer the question, do you need special revelation for salvation? Second, to demonstrate comprehension of the historic debate on the use of general revelation, and that's the use of outside research, as well as diving into our systematic theology textbook, to define the doctrines of inspiration, inerrancy, and authority, which you could choose to do on one of your posts, and then finally to formulate biblical answers to contemporary challenges on the doctrine of Scripture, and we did that through our conclusions on each assignment. Now, the quality of the work this week I thought was much better. We still are running into some grammar errors, and I'm going to touch on those at the end of this video. But I wanted to just kind of walk through, because I think people aren't reading the assignments, not everyone, but some folks are not reading the assignments closely enough to be able to pick out all the things I'm looking to grade for. So on assignment 2.1, it said, in 2 to 3 pages, critically evaluate Erickson's doctrine of Scripture. Now, to me, as your professor grading this, critically evaluate means right off the bat you're going to need to fully understand and outline Erickson's views using both biblical evidence and Erickson's quotes as evidence for your position. But then to critically evaluate it, you have to move in to looking at other scholars and do they agree or disagree with Erickson, and then where do you land? And then using support from either the other outside scholars or Erickson to support your position. So if we went no further, we would know that critically evaluate Erickson's doctrine of Scripture means you need to understand and fully articulate Erickson's doctrine of Scripture with biblical support and Erickson support, and then outside research as the foil against which to analyze it. However, it goes on to say, including how the overall doctrine is constructed. So that gives you a couple more hints of what to look for on the doctrine of Scripture, and which aspects of the overall doctrine he covers and doesn't cover. Well, to understand what he covers and doesn't cover, you have to look at additional scholars to see what they cover and don't cover, and then match them up and see what he's missing. Show the biblical support for his conclusions as well as contrast with other theories. So that's really just giving you a couple more hints of what we saw in that purple top critically evaluate section. Compare his approach to other treatments found in other systematic theologies in your Logos resources to provide evidence for your evaluation. I think that the designer of this course did a really nice job pointing you in the right direction, and this is a great example of what I'm looking for in all of your papers. It's biblical support, it's evidence of what you found in Erickson, and it's outside research, and then it is your assimilation of all of that into your personal understanding and position. Second assignment is a friend is struggling with the idea that only people who have the Bible can know God. Okay, so we know that we're going to either write a paper or a letter. Either one is fine, but both have to have the same kind of supporting structure. You can't just write a high-level glossary of a letter and have it score the same. So even though it's a letter, it needs support. Now I put in red here because some people skipped the second part of the assignment. Doesn't the Bible itself say in Romans 1 that all people have knowledge of God? And so a successful paper or a 100 on a paper required that you interact with Romans 1 and engage with how you feel of its role in general, and then Paul's continuing discussion of specific revelation. Can't they know God through general revelation? So that's kind of saying the same thing in both those bullets. Write a 2 to 3 page letter to your friend, or develop a 2 to 3 page position paper in which you address what it means to know God. And some folks wrote a letter about what it means to know God, but really missed the deeper part of the assignment, which is to discuss specific versus general revelation. And in fact, that sentence goes on to say to know God and the role of general and special revelation in the knowledge of God. And so some folks who got B's or even C's on this assignment wrote a great letter about how to know God, but really didn't interact with the core of the assignment, which is knowing God through general and special revelation, and a heavy emphasis on Paul's use in Romans, and then contextually other passages, including Psalm 19 and others, on general versus specific revelation. Then we had some discussion posts. One option was, again, on general and special revelation, and I wanted an in-depth analysis of general and special in your discussion. And then I highlighted the word science because I looked for, did you engage with the scientific method, or at least an understanding of science in your overall discussion. You could also, and if you did, talk about inerrancy. I thought that was awesome. They scored really well. And I wanted a quote from the Chicago Statement on inerrancy. I was looking for some background contextual study. We've talked about context and how important it is. And so I wanted some folks to discuss, how did the Chicago Statement on inerrancy come about? Is it a Baptist doctrine, or a Methodist doctrine, or an evangelical doctrine, or a Jewish doctrine? What is behind it? What is the context for it? And then what biblical support do they use for inerrancy? And I thought folks did a pretty good job. I also highlighted here, describe something that was new to you or surprised you about the statement. So I wanted some personal interaction after your academic interaction on what inerrancy means. And then finally, I wanted the implications for the modern church with that. So on whole, we're moving the right direction. If you did not get a score of 95 or above, then that means I was looking for more, either more biblical support, more outside research, more academic engagement with the reading, and I think for the most part, folks are doing a really good job on the personal reflection side of assignments. But those three are the big three to move you from whatever grade you're at now to a 95 or above. So on Turabian, just a couple of quick notes. I am going to continue to count off for grammar and formatting problems. That actually can take an entire letter grade if I feel that these are errors that should be corrected in proofreading or in just knowledge of Turabian. And then I count obviously less if I feel it's a minor error, just a typo, one typo you missed. But Bible is capitalized, not little b Bible. So always capitalize Bible. Biblical is not capitalized. Word and scripture, if they are used to mean Bible, are capitalized. So capital W word, capital S scripture. If you're quoting a biblical passage, then the appropriate way to do that is not in a footnote, but in a, not a quotation mark, but a parenthesis at the end of the sentence that has an abbreviation for the book, in this case, Gen for Genesis, then a space, no comma, the chapter title, colon, and then the verses. So Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 3 would be parenthesis, Gen, space, 1, colon, 1-3, close parenthesis at the end of the sentence. Now you can always say Moses writes in Genesis 1 verses 1 to 3, blank, 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 and that's fine. But don't use a footnote. Use this as your format for citation inside of a paragraph. And then use it at the end of the quote, not in the footnote. Then cite the Bible version in your bibliography. So if you're using the NIV or the ESV or the NRSV or whichever version you're using, cite that in your bibliography. Then on footnotes, we continue to have some consistent problems. Millard J. Erickson, so in a footnote, full use of the author's name. And by the way, in your writing, the first time you write the author's name, you don't say last name only, you say first and last name. So if you're writing a sentence, Erickson writes, blank, 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 in a quote, it's Millard Erickson writes, blank, 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 in a quote, the first time you use his name. Then in the footnote, you use the full citation, which is the full name, comma, the name of the book, article, or work, in italics, no comma, but a space, then a parenthesis, the city, Grand Rapids, colon, the publisher, Baker Academic, comma, 2013, close parentheses, comma, and then the page number. Now, if you use Long or some other author next, so footnote 1 is Erickson, footnote 2 is someone else, footnote 3 is Erickson, then you use a short form for second non-consecutive uses of a footnote, and that's just the author's last name, a short form title of the book. This book is 2 words, we just use the 2 words, and then a comma, and then the page number. So long form, another citation, short form. However, if they are consecutive uses, then you use IBID, I-B-I-D, period, because it's a abbreviation. If they're the same, you don't put the page number. So if your first quote is Erickson, page 150. Your second quote is Erickson, then you use IBID, period, if it's page 150. If it's a different page, then you use IBID, period, comma, and then the page number, let's say 120, period. So these are the proper way to use Turabian formatting. Be sure to italicize the book title. Be sure to use the proper short form. Be sure to use IBID if it's consecutive uses of the same author. All right. Have a great week. I look forward to reading what you come up with in week 3, and I appreciate all of your work this semester.